All right, we've done it. We've made it to the final sermon in our Esther worship series, and I hope you, like me, have enjoyed this. This is just one of those great stories in the Bible that is, first and foremost, just a really great story. It's got a lot of intrigue and a lot of excitement, and a lot of really interesting characters, and it stands out for those reasons because that is not most characters, most people in the Bible are not very well explored. There's a few, Moses, David, folks like that, but there aren't too many that are as explored in stories and whose stories are dived this deep into, and especially women. There are very few women who get as much attention and opportunity to act in the way that Esther does. So let's talk first and foremost about where we are ending up. So Haman last week kind of met his own demise. If you read chapter 7, you know kind of what happened to him. My wife, without actually reading the book, accurately guessed that the gallows that he had built for Mordecai that were not used for Mordecai were in fact used for Haman. So really, his pride, his hubris, really, at the end of the day, was his undoing. But that doesn't actually fix everything. And Esther knows that, and I'm sure Esther's not necessarily upset to see, upset to see him gone, not obviously being a fan, but she still has this other problem, the big problem, the problem that started all this thing off in the first place, which was this edict sent out by the king to destroy all the Jews. Now, here we end up in a similar position to where we were in chapter 1, which is, while the king is sympathetic to Esther and sympathetic to the idea that maybe we ought not be killing all of these people, that he also has issued a decree, and it went out with the royal ring thing on it, and that apparently means that it can't be undone. You'll remember in chapter 1, that was the thing that he sent out an edict that even he himself couldn't undo, and that was foreshadowing in the very traditional and classical sense for this point now, where the king's like, well, I can't take that order back because once you, how would that even work? Once you've given an order, how can you possibly take it back? So they have to come up with a different solution. And the solution that the king proposes and that ends up going out is another edict, because we just haven't had enough of those, and they've worked out oh so well for us so far. Another edict goes out, and in this case, it basically says the Jews are allowed to defend themselves should anybody go after them under the guise of the previous edict. Now, it's a little surprising because I'm a little surprised to learn that they wouldn't have defended themselves anyway. Normally, if somebody's coming at you with ill intent, just human nature is you will defend yourself, and I didn't know you needed permission to do that, but apparently he thought maybe they wouldn't. So he says it's okay to defend yourself, so that's good, but it also sends a message to everybody else that he's not really, the king really isn't standing by that previous edict, and that that they're not going to guarantee anybody's safety who chooses to go after their neighbors under the guise of that. And so, as you might expect, a lot of people just decide not to do it. Now, again, Haman doesn't get so lucky. His sons, they don't get so lucky. And there are a few that do choose to go out who frankly, whose distrust and dislike of the Jews is so deep and so strong that they do choose to go out and try to take advantage of the situation that's in front of them. And if you keep reading after chapter 8, in chapter 9 and 10, and what happens after that, it does not work out well for them either. So at the end of the day, in this weird sort of roundabout way, the Jews are saved. Esther's people and Mordecai's people are saved. They're no longer under threat of the previous edict that had gone out. The king has certainly changed his mind about them. It's not actually even clear if the king ever himself bore any ill will towards them. I mean, he didn't even know who they really were when Haman first started raising concerns. So as much as this is maybe a reversal, maybe it's not, but he clearly doesn't have any problem. And the other way we know that is that everything that Haman had and everything that Haman was and all of his privileges and all of his wealth and all of that is transferred by the king to Mordecai. This is Mordecai really, at the end of the day, getting his just reward for saving the king's life all the way back at the beginning of the book. So that original thing, the thing that set all this going off in the first place, the fact that Haman was favored over Mordecai, even though Mordecai's the one who saved his life, all of that gets corrected at this time, and so Mordecai is reestablished and becomes really the second in command. He becomes, the king's first advisor. As far as we know, Esther continues to act as queen, as she already was, and really things for the most part go back to normal. And the last bit of the book is them setting up something important. And that is the festival, the annual festival of Purim, that is really what this whole story is about. I mean, the reason this whole story exists and that was written down and continued to be offered up, it was included in the Bible in the first place, even though, frankly, God's not in it a whole lot. The whole reason it was there was to explain to people why we do this annual festival of Purim. Like, we don't actually do it, but why do we do it? And it's to celebrate Esther and Mordecai, and it's to celebrate the victory that they had, and it's to celebrate the fact that they were not destroyed, that all of this group throughout this foreign empire was not destroyed when it looks like they could have been. And so they, of course, decide to celebrate this day and remember this day in a way very, very, very fitting to the book of Esther, which is every year at this time of year, they are called on to have a 2-day banquet. This really could be the book of banquets. I mean, it really could. They play a far more outsized role than you or I probably ever thought banquets could or would ever play. But turns out every major turning point in the story, if you noticed, happens at the banquet, right? The queen is banished at the banquet, and then and then Esther convinces the king to do something different, and that was at a banquet. And now, of course, at the end of the day, every year, for 2 days, not just one, for 2 days, there is supposed to be a time of enjoyment and celebration and the sharing of gifts of food and an opportunity for people to gather and remember what they were saved from and remember those who saved them. So to tell the story of Esther and Mordecai and, of course, the others too who were involved. Now, what is striking to me about this, besides the many things in the story that is striking to me, is that idea of the celebration. They should need to be celebrating because they've been saved. And if we really take a minute to think about what that means, yes, they were saved from destruction, which is, of course, important. But in many ways, what they are celebrating is a return to normalcy. Right? Because while things work out pretty well for Esther, she was queen before all this and she remains queen. Things work out well for Mordecai. He was important before and he remains important. He's probably a little more wealthy now and those sorts of things, all of that. But for pretty much everybody else, for all the other Jews who were going about their lives only to learn one day that there's an edict come down from the king that they were to be destroyed, really, what they are celebrating is the ability to go back to living normal lives. I think they, and I think us today, probably suffer from the same problem. And the problem is that it's very easy to forget how great normal is or even just how good normal is or can be before it's taken away for a time. One of the pieces of kind of like family lore, family history in my family, we tell a lot of stories about a lot of people. One figure that looms large is my great-grandfather, and he was an entrepreneur and a businessman and a very well-respected person back in Columbus, Ohio. And part of the excitement and the joy that I had of actually getting to live in Columbus for a time when I was in seminary and my wife was in nursing school was getting to know and learn. He passed away, when I was just started college in the mid-90s. So he's been gone for a while. And while I did meet him on several occasions, I only got to know him in the way, that kids get to know adults, right? And so I do dearly wish, and he is one of those people that I wish now as an adult I could spend some time with him now and to learn from him now. But one of the kind of family pieces of history amongst my great-grandfather's long list of accomplishments was this idea that during World War II, he had served on the rationing board for Columbus, where he was, and actually he owned at the time, and for most of his life he did, a canned food business. And so it would make sense for him then actually to be part of this board. And so one of the things that happened during World War II, and I think it's really the last time that it really happened in this country, was widespread rationing. And as much as we may find it inconvenient today that we seem to be living through a time where, we can't always find the things we want at the store. I've spoken to the people I know who actually work in the grocery business and how frustrated they are that they cannot get the things that they want to sell to us. They are as frustrated as we are. Most of us, unless we were alive during World War II time, have really never experienced the kind of rationing and scarcity that existed then for as long as it existed, because that's really was the last time that not only were things scarce, but things were scarce for as long as they were scarce over the many years of that war. And so one of the things that had to happen is communities all set up their own, we're all responsible for administering a rationing process for their community, and they did it with these little stamp books. And so not only did you have to have the money you needed to buy your food, especially certain items, at the grocery store, but you had to have an adequate number of stamps. You could have all the money in the world, but if you didn't have the stamps that allowed you to purchase it, then you weren't going to get it. And it was all based on this really interesting point system where everybody got so many points, and then, certain things cost more or less. And instead of, and really it was an interesting affair, because basically instead of allowing the price to fluctuate, like the actual dollar price to fluctuate with demand as it would during kind of like normal situations, right? Our way that our economy is set up under normal circumstances, if, demand is high and availability is low, the prices go up. I mean, just look at, the car market in the last few years or last few months. That's how it's supposed to work. In order to not basically price Americans out of everyday food and things that we needed, the price wouldn't go, they would control the prices so they wouldn't necessarily go up or down much, but the amount of stamps that it costs, the amount of points that it cost you would go up and down depending on whether or not, something was available or unavailable. And as you can imagine, like some people got it and they didn't mind it, and other times people didn't really like it. And it was a bit of, looking back on it now, it's just, okay, that's just one of those things that happens, but it was a bit of controversy at the time. And I love this description that a person who was on the board of rationing board in Portland, Oregon, actually wrote, he wrote this: "Suppose the demand for coffee exceeded the supply, which it does, and there were no rationing. What would happen then is a woman who got up to go to the grocery store first would get the coffee, and the woman who arrived late would get none. That means that the woman working in a defense plant and with not much time for shopping around would be coffeeless, so that the woman who has little else to do but shop would have more." How can we have people going to work coffeeless? Even, 70 years ago, that was a problem, and it would be a problem today. And he goes on to talk about, how that wouldn't be fair and all that stuff. And the article actually goes on to describe rationing and how rationing worked. One of the big things was gas rationing, and all cars were not created equal. If you had a car you didn't use a lot or only used for fun, that was allocated a very small amount of gas. If you had a car that was more important, it was rated A through E. A for unimportant, things you just do for good times. E got far more. Actually, the E got all the gas that they wanted, but they were reserved. The article says it's reserved for only a select class of people, including police and clergymen. So I'm glad to know that 7 years ago in World War II, I could have had all the gasoline I wanted. Like, that's great. But it was this way. I mean, and what rationing really was it's a way for people who were at home to do what they could to obviously support those who were away, especially the soldiers who were away actually fighting in the conflict. Because at the end of the day, what everyone, or at least most everyone, agreed to is that there needed to be enough. We had to make sure that no matter what happened, that we had enough to get the supplies to those who were fighting on our behalf away. And if that means that we, as the ones who were home, have to sacrifice a little bit or go without a little bit so that those who are far away have the opportunity to have what they need, then that is okay. One of the times that that I've loved looking at, and one of the times where you can just really see like celebration on people's faces, and when you see those great films of people just crowding into the street and the parades and everything that happened, is when things like World War II, World War I, those sorts of things, when they finally came to an end. And they were celebrating for all sorts of reasons. And not only did we, who of course we are on the side of good, overcome, not only were we victorious, which always feels good, but I do think that even at that moment, part of that celebration that was happening was this hope that there may actually begin to be a return to normalcy. Because as much as people were willing to, and most people were willing to participate in the rationing process and participate in that way, and to do the sacrifices that were necessary to get us through that time, there no doubt was a sense of, of course there would be, a sense of, I wonder how long this is going to last. I wonder how long we're going to have to do this. I wonder when we're going to get back to normal. When does my husband come home? When does my son, my brother come home? And we can get back. When does my fiance get home? And we can get back to a normal life. Because the truth is, we crave that idea of normalcy. We are people of habit and people who like things to be normal as much as they can be. We can often take it for granted that things are and always will be normal. We really don't like it when things disrupt our normal, and we really celebrate when we get back to those times and those places that feel more normal. Even though what we are celebrating, what Esther's people are celebrating, what people celebrated after World War II, what people celebrated all these times, what we are celebrating there with great excitement and energy is a return to what, for many of us, a desire to return to what had been there before. Because when it is gone, or when it is not quite as normal as we want it to be, it is in those moments that we recognize how amazing and important that normal is. Now, today is not only the end of our worship series on Esther. Today is also an important day in the life of our country, and of course, it's Memorial Day. And Memorial Day has a really interesting history. There are at least 25 competing claims for who invented Memorial Day. We really don't honestly know. We know it goes back to something like the 1860s, 1870s, and one of those, so we've been celebrating it for about 150 years, and it's traditionally focused on the same function. And of course, that function is to remember those who died in service to our country. We remember those who paid the ultimate and complete ultimate price, a price higher than most of us will ever be asked to do, not for them, but for us. So we set aside a day, and really one day a year almost doesn't even feel like enough, but it's what we do. We set aside a day like today, a day like Memorial Day, to remember those. And we do it in all sorts of ways, and people have all sorts of traditions about how to do it. It's very popular to visit grave sites and to put flowers on things. It's really popular, to see and celebrate and reach out to the veterans among us, even though we have Veterans Day as well, to do that. And to just do what we can to remember that what we enjoy here and what we've enjoyed as this country now going back the better part of 2.5 centuries, that didn't come to us without sacrifice, right? That did not come to us and we did not inherit what we all inherit without the hard work, sacrifice, and sometimes the ultimate sacrifice of others who did it on our behalf. And in many ways, what they are sacrificing for is our ability and our freedom to even have a normal. And I think that's the thing that I take from this lesson from Esther, and I take from the lessons of Memorial Day, and all of this, all the things that we've talked about, is that really, even just the ability to have something we call normal, to have a set of expectations that we expect to be met. We expect there to be food, we expect there to be freedom, we expect there to be something to watch on TV, we expect that when we go outside our car will start, we expect that our friends and families will answer the phones when we call, and will listen to us when we want to complain, and comfort us when we are feeling sad. All of those things that we just take for granted as normal, as just the way things are, we have to remember, and we need to remember. We need to remember because of our Bible story, we need to remember because of Memorial Day, we need to remember for all these reasons, all those reasons and many more, that sense of normalcy is in amongst itself a gift. It is a gift that, quite frankly, not everybody has. There are plenty throughout history and plenty in the world, people in the world today who live with no sense of normalcy. They live in a world that is constantly feels like it's moving and changing and things are being different all the time. Constantly having to adjust, constantly having to adapt to some new outside force, some of which may even want to do them harm. The fact that we can have, the fact that we have a normal that can be disrupted is a gift. It is a blessing. And we are called on as people of faith to appreciate all of the gifts and blessings that come into our lives. Sometimes the gifts and blessings are big things. Sometimes the gifts and blessings are little things. Sometimes the gifts and blessings that come into our lives is the ability to wake up in the morning, know pretty much what's going to happen that day, have those things pretty much happen, and get to go to bed safe and secure at night. That may sound like something that doesn't sound all that great, but we all know, and at this point after the last couple of years, we do all know how hard and difficult it is when those things, that opportunity, those sorts of days are taken away from us. So today, let us remember not only Esther and that story and all the things that happened, all the ways in which God worked through those folks to deliver God's people so many thousands of years ago. Let us also remember those who sacrificed for us, who makes our normal life even possible. And for those of us who maybe are feeling like we don't feel that normal, for those of us who are feeling our normal has been disrupted and continues to be disrupted, let us remember the hope that we have. The hope that we have in God and the hope that we have in the Holy Spirit and the hope that we have in Christ. That on our normal days and our abnormal ones, when we are feeling on top of the world and we're feeling well under it, that God is with us. The God who saved the Jews, who worked through two very unlikely people, and the most unlikely Esther, God who worked through her to deliver normalcy back. Let us have faith and trust that the blessings we have received from God, the ones we have already received, are not the only ones we will. That God continues to be with us, walking beside us on our normal days and our not normal ones. And let us work hard. More important than anything, let us work hard to appreciate what we have. Appreciate the normalness. Appreciate when there isn't excitement. Appreciate when things just go along the way. Because some paid a very high price for us to even be able to have those days. So let us thank God. Thank God for each other. Thank God for the friends and family we have in our lives. Thank God for those who sacrificed on our behalf. Thank God for his blessings that God has placed into each and every one of us. And let us savor all the life we can, and savor those normal days as the gift that they are. Amen.